Hello? Something sounds weird. I can't quite hear you. Can you hear me? Um, Hold on a second. I'm gonna try to fix the audio. It is not sounding right. I'll be right back.
Hi, Dave. Oh, okay. Just a second. It looks like we're having some technical difficulties on the audio. We're going to see if changing our audios makes a difference. I'm not sure if you're plugged in somewhere different. If you can hear me, Dave, we just entered a question in the chat for you.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Advocating for Results, Steps for Sharing Our Wisdom and Passion. My name is Grace Rowan, one of the graduate assistants at IHEC, and I'll be your moderator. I'm assisting Aisha, the Assistant Director for Illinois Higher Education Center for Alcohol, Other Drug, and Violence Prevention, and we are very excited to be hosting today's event. We apologize for the late start. Before I hand over the microphone, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about today's webinar and the GoToWebinar platform. For those of you new to using GoToWebinar, you'll see the control panel on the right of your screen. This is where you'll find the question box you can type and submit to. Dr. Anderson will have 3 separate opportunities during his presentation for questions. All attendees will be muted for today's program, but that doesn't mean you still can't participate. Feel free to unmute yourself or type in the question box during the question portions of this presentation. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. David Anderson.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Grace. And sorry about the technical delays. We had a good practice earlier. So we want to talk today about advocating for results. And just a little bit of background. I may have met some of you over the years, whether it's at ACPA conference, NASPA conference, ACUHO, or even at IHEC, doing an all-day training, I don't know, a couple, 3 years ago. So I appreciate your signing on today. We'll spend up to 1 o'clock on this. And I just should point out that we're going to move pretty quickly. As Grace said, there's a few opportunities for some questions if you have them, and we can also dialogue by email or telephone after the fact. So this is really a fast run for this. As many of you know, my background was as a college administrator for a dozen years. I developed an initial program on a campus way back when. Served as a faculty member, and I've been working with alcohol and other drug issues for 45 years professionally. My first book was in 1979. My most recent book was last fall, and you'll see reference to that infused through here. And I'm working on a brand new book due to the publisher July 1 on college level alcohol and other drug issues and leadership, and that's where you all fit in. So you wonder why a session on advocacy? And it's really from my experience working with professionals, training professionals, helping them to share the knowledge that they have and ideally move closer to getting results. There's certainly no guarantees. So without further ado, we'll look through or start moving through. We have 3 learning outcomes. It's a 9-step model that I've created for planning persuasive communication. And then there's some specific approaches for reaching various audiences, and then ultimately to gain some confidence and skills to move towards more positive outcomes, the outcomes that you and I want. I couch all of this with something that I call and have used for years, something called the pyramid of success. So with the pyramid of success, the first of the 3 elements is competence, having the skills. Can you imagine going to a doctor or a dentist or an auto mechanic or having an airline pilot and he or she does not have the competence, the skill? So my premise is that you all have competence and you're growing in that competence overall. We're talking about subject matter competence. So while graduate programs, none of our graduate programs nationally have a required course on alcohol and other drugs or a required course on health promotion. Many programs have that as an option, but that's an area where we can grow as a profession. Second is confidence. That's believing in yourself. And that's why I really started doing a lot more with this. I actually initiated, when I was at George Mason University, initiated a course called Health Communication to help build the skills and the confidence around communication and around persuasion. So having the confidence, the belief in yourself, and then the commitment. The challenge with commitment is that many of us burn out. You're saying, well, David, you're not a good example. You've been doing this for 45 years. Well, I'm not burning out. I get more and more energized, but I'm very much aware and just recently presented some research with a colleague at University of Denver at the NASPA Strategies Conference 2 months ago, looking at, and more formally, the obstacles that AOD folks face on their campus. And so we're trying to gain a better understanding so we can better address the obstacles. The obstacles are there, you know that. So again, we'll try to address each of these 3: competence, confidence, and commitment. So with communication overall, just getting a sense of some of the basics. The question is, what do you want the audience to know, feel, or do? So if you're doing a workshop, you're doing a speech, you're doing a training, you're meeting with your chief student affairs officer, director of health services, director of security, community leaders, parents, student groups, what do you want them to know, feel, or do, and/or do as a result of whatever your initiative is? If you're doing a social norms marketing effort, if you're doing a TED Talk, if you're doing a workshop, whatever. What do you want them to know, feel, or do? So that's just a reminder, going back to those basics. So let's do a quick polling, a real quick polling, and let's see if we can do this. There is a polling, and let's see if does this go live? These are 3 quick questions. So the poll should be open, and Grace or Aisha can tell me if this is live.
Yes, it is.
Good. So basically we're going to have 3 questions. They're about the pyramid of success. Real quick polling, what is your competence for advocating on these issues? What is your own self-assessment of your competence? So we have about half who have voted. So if you others could just key in on that on a 5-point scale, from 1 being extremely low to 5 being extremely high. This is self-assessment. This is not scientifically validated. It's really for discussion purposes. I'll show you the results once we get all these in. So a couple more who need to vote. If you haven't, please do, and we'll close it down. Okay, ready to close? Okay, we're going to close that one, and I'm going to go to the next question, and this is your confidence. What is your confidence? Same question, but it's on the issue of confidence. So it's not your skills on advocacy, it's your belief in yourself, your confidence. You may have great skills, you may be scared to death, and that's pretty normal. So again, my aim would be to move your confidence up. I think it would be dangerous to have a lot of confidence and no skills. So again, if there's anyone who hasn't voted, another couple seconds, and then we're going to close that. Okay, so we're closing that, and we have one last assessment question, and it's the commitment, your perseverance, your stick-with-itedness. How committed are you to advocating? Just keep adding it, even if you get beaten down. It's hard, I know that. So the commitment, what's your level of commitment on your own self-assessment? Again, about 5 seconds to put in a number from 1 to 5. And let's go ahead and close that. Now let's just see what the results show. I think we can show these now. If we go back, will it show? Can I share the results? Will it share the results?
It is sharing.
Okay, so you can see right now, thank you very much for that. You can see that we have a range here. So on competence, we have 60% who feel low in terms of their skills, and that's okay, nothing wrong with that. 20% who have moderate, and 20% high. So we're going to go to the next one and share it, see if that will share.
Yep.
The next, it looks like the same pattern, 20, 60, and so this is confidence, as we see in the small shaded area up above. So it's the same pattern, and then we're going to the third one, and we're sharing. And so this is a little different. So this is 25% at a 1, and 25% at a 3, and 50% at a 4. So we're a little lower on the commitment. The high is no one maxed out on that. So we're going to close that polling and go back to our slides. We're going to go back to the slides and then move through our discussion. So what you're going to see throughout here are some quotes. And I mentioned this was my most recent book published last fall called Leadership in Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention, Insights from Long-Term Advocates. What I set out to do 5 or 6 years ago is catch some wisdom and capture it and write about it from a bunch of people doing initiatives around alcohol and drugs throughout society. Many of these are college-based, many are not. Some are in prevention, some are in treatment, some are in more policy, some are state level, national level, some are evaluators, some are researchers. So Jeff Linkenbach said something, he's out in Montana, and he said something, this is all about process, not programs. And I wanted to highlight that, and we'll keep coming back to that, because what I'm going to introduce today is really a process. So we jump to the programs, as Jeff says, and I believe you're going to be able to access this webinar after the fact, and anyone who wants this as just a PDF file with these slides, so you can pull out slides, whatever, are welcome to do that. You know, so if you like a certain slide, you can pull out things. And the other thing I'll just highlight with this is, with this webinar, it's an hour in length, and so after the fact, if there's something you want to go back and listen to again and think about, or even if you have a 2 or 3 minute segment and you want to share it with staff members after the fact, that says, hey, listen to the section on, there's a 9-part model, listen to item number 4, item number 5. Let's just spend 2 or 3 minutes in our staff training looking at that and figuring out how we can apply that for our campus at this point in time on this issue. So anyway, you can read about Jeffson. You're going to see other quotes along the way. So what we have here is 9 steps. These are the steps we're going to go through today. Remember that this is really a process. This is a process. It's not linear necessarily, meaning once you've done step 1 or step 2, then you're done with it. No, you keep coming back to it. But if you think about this, you know, really where the rubber hits the road is right here under appeal. If you see the mouse moving under appeal, where the rubber hits the road, that's all the things that we do. But we need to ground it in these issues. And not to belabor this, not just spend 5 minutes on this, but to ground it. And so that's what we're going to go through. And again, this is a brief webinar. We can go much deeper. This is easily an all-day training. So with each of these 9 areas, I'm going to highlight what the area is. Here in the lower right, it's just a half sentence about what that means. What are the needs you want to have met? What are the issues you're trying to address? And then what I'm going to do is have a quick summary of what that means. You know, what does that mean? Being grounded, being up to date. And then I'm going to have some content where relevant. I'm going to have some quotes, and then I'm from the book, and then I'm going to have some content where relevant to deal with this. So when we're talking about the needs, you know, you want to think about the needs of, you know, particular audiences, different subpopulations. You know, there may be needs with respect to fraternities and or sororities, or student athletes, or first-year students, or new faculty members, LGBTQ, or veterans. Being up to date, this is, you know, when we think about what's happening today, every day with this whole COVID-19, the coronavirus, we don't have all the knowledge. We're getting a lot of knowledge. It keeps unfolding. Being up to date as much as we can, and then acknowledging where we have uncertainty. If I think back, I don't know, 20 years, I was on a board in Virginia, a volunteer board for mental health and substance abuse for Arlington, Virginia. And this was when 9/11 happened, and there was a lot of uncertainty of what happened that day, and until all the facts came out. And then how do we deal with the aftermath? And are we at risk? I mean, you know, the plane crashed into the Pentagon literally 10 miles from my home, and I'm on the leadership board and saying, how do we communicate to the community about mental health? Let's talk about, we're in uncertain territory, and let's talk about we're in uncertain territory, and let's just be honest about it rather than, oh, you know, just hang in there. So again, with coronavirus, you know, every day does bring new information. Let's put the facts out there when we talk about alcohol and other drugs, when we talk about substance use disorders, tobacco, vaping. Talk about the facts as we know them, and then identify where we have gaps. We want to try to fill those in, try to get the knowledge. And a point I'll make here that I'll make throughout is when we try to fill in gaps, it's important to be both quantitative and qualitative. So it's not just rely on a survey, or not just rely on numbers. Let's also focus on focus groups and discussions and information sharing. Mary Hill was very active in campus alcohol and other drug issues. Just had a reflection. It appears like we have a downhill movement, but you can always move forward. And she believes we can be more creative when you have problems. So we have a problem to solve. How do we be more creative? How can colleges and universities, with our students, our faculty, our other affiliates, how can we move forward? How can we harness this to maintain the health and safety of our constituencies, our multiple constituencies? And then a couple of examples. This comes from the NCAA. I serve as an evaluator for them with their Choices grants. And so last fall, I reviewed 40 annual reports, so 40 from different campuses, 40 campuses. And so one of the questions we have in the template for the annual reports is, you know, how do you ground? What's your rationale? How do you ground your efforts? And so here are a couple of different examples, you know, the core survey or NCHA data, or one in the lower right, evaluation results show the need for more education. or this was from incident reports. So that's a particular way of being evidence informed from their perspective. Another cluster of the examples was from the campus leader's prior experience. You know, in my experience, such and such won't work. Whoops, such and, did the webinar go dead? Something just happened. Something just happened. What happened? Is anyone's?
We can see your screen and it's saying.
Okay, you can see my screen. Okay.
Yes.
I wonder what happened. That is weird. That is weird. I don't know what happened. Power surge? I don't know. Anyway, prior experience, and this was an HBCU campus, and this was a tragic experience. And sadly, many of us have tragic experiences, and we do something with that. So that becomes part of our evidence. Whatever your experience is from your current campus or a prior campus, that is a valid piece of evidence. So a second cluster, and I know I'm moving quickly, a second cluster is what assumptions you have about what might make a difference. And when I talk about that, talk about your theoretical underpinnings. Think about your logic model. We've all done logic models. And then think about guiding principles. So theory, we know a lot about theory. There's lots of different theories. I'll come to that in a moment. Here's a couple quotes. Here's a framework or a paradigm. Think of this as a health and safety issue, not a moral issue. But you will encounter constituencies who have a belief that this is a moral issue. Again, this may vary. Marijuana may be a moral issue, but alcohol not, or vice versa, or underage drinking. And then take it out of the realm of being a legal issue. Again, Helene White from Rutgers said it's a health and safety issue. Here are a bunch of the theories. This came out of the Choices Grantees reports. When we said, what's guiding your effort, whether it's your experience or your incident reports, but what is guiding it? Are you doing it from some sort of documented reason? What is your evidence? And a bunch of these theories, you may have had these in health promotion courses or in professional training, but identifying what is your grounding and blending theories. Now, if you want to read a lot more about these, I have a book on health communication, health and safety communication that I'll highlight at the end, where I do a paragraph or two on half a dozen different theories. But you can go read about these or define your own. And then I know that one of the bullets at the beginning was guiding principles. What does that mean? People don't know. I remember serving or being invited to serve on a campus task force on alcohol and other drug issues. And when I was invited maybe 20 years ago, I was a faculty member, I participated, and then I felt that it really wasn't good engagement. I was a token faculty. I think they may have had a token student, and literally that. And so the next time I was invited, I don't know, 6-8 years later, I said, you know, there's a couple of principles that I think are important. One is there needs to be meaningful representation from students. And second, there needs to be meaningful faculty engagement, and not just one student and not just one faculty. And then third, if you're going to do a report, please let it not be a shelf report. Let it be a report that will be used. So that needs to be a guiding principle. It may be that we're going to tape our meetings. We're going to have them open to the public. We're going to have, we're going to limit it to 6 months. We're going to use a variety of variety of qualitative and quantitative approaches in gathering data. But here are a couple of considerations about this. We're going to come back to shared responsibilities in a later slide. So the third one is thinking about the stakeholders. So as you're thinking about stakeholders, who they are, who might be interested in lending a hand, where might some access points be where you want to engage with them, where are some resources that you already have on your campus or in your community. Or I might cite this happened today, this happened this morning. I'm a member of ACHA, and as a now emeritus faculty, I'm an emeritus member of ACHA. I still pay my dues, but they put a call out to emeritus faculty that says, with the coronavirus issue, we need your all's help. People on campus are swamped, they're flooded, they're in crisis mode, they're trying to stay up. Is there something that you might be able to do from a remote setting, i.e. webinar, that you can share? And so again, thinking about stakeholders, thinking about assets, and then last but not least, frame it in the institutional context. What are your needs? What are the hot buttons in your campus today and in the community today? What does your mission statement say, whether it's on the campus or at the state level, as public schools, as private schools? What does your mission statement say? So again, a reflection on this when we think about this. Bill Modzelewski was basically the drug czar for the US Department of Education for like 20 years. And he just says, just using that measure, and he's talking about data, he's talking about drug use patterns. Using that measure alone hasn't been able to influence people. The fact that we're saying, you know, high risk drinking hasn't changed among college students, but more recently in the last 10 years, yes, it is going down, but that's not enough to influence people. The marijuana use is going up. That's not enough to influence the decision makers. We need to do more to get to their heart, so that they can actually say, we better do something about this. So let's use this opportunity for any open questions that you may have. We've done the first 3 bullets on this. Are there any open questions? And that is in the chat room. If anyone has something, you can post it now. We're going to have 2 more opportunities for that, or I think your microphones can be live if you make sure you're unmuted. So if you want to say something, speak up. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward. Does anyone want to raise a question or a comment or anything at this point? Okay, seeing none, again, we'll have another opportunity after slide topic number 6. Let's look at our results. Here's the issue with results. Think about what desired results you want. If you're going to do a campaign, if you're going to do a training with coaches or athletic trainers, if you're going to do something with residence hall staff, if you're going to do something with your peer educators, what is the results? What is the result that you want with that? Be reasonable. If you want to change the world, great. I do too. But that's not reasonable. We will not eliminate drug abuse, alcohol abuse, but we can better manage it. I think if we keep our sight on trying to reduce drug abuse and alcohol abuse, we try to reduce it and have some reasonable goals, reasonable objectives, have our measures, have our milestones. As we build our goals and objectives, as you all know, objectives are measurable. So having reasonable objectives, reasonable outcomes, and then watching those results and seeing if something's working or not. You might have some consequences or some initiatives that you have that don't have the results or the consequences that you wanted. So constant feedback loop on that. Robert Lynn, who does a lot of clinical work, but also does some organization work. And he's talking about collecting good outcome data with clients. The same thing applies for programs and for policies. Is the data that we're gathering, is it showing that what we're doing, whether it's a policy, a program, a training, does it make a difference? Does it make a difference? And so, we want that data, quantitative, qualitative, but we also have our own compassion, and we can, again, he says we can have better results, better outcomes, and I believe that. When we think about outcomes, now we also think about our stakeholders. So this is kind of parallel when we're thinking about the stakeholders on item 3. Right now I'm focusing on the specific outcomes, and then outcomes with what do they want. So when you think of your president or chancellor, when you think about your chief student affairs officer, when you think about faculty members, what are the outcomes they want? And those might be a little different. President, chancellor, and chief student affairs officer might be more alike, but they're dealing with reputation, enrollment, enhancing the good of the institution, keeping out the bad things, however that's defined in their bailiwick, minimizing safety concerns, promoting good safety and good health. The chief student affairs officer is looking at student success. Faculty members looking at publications, looking at their own impact on their audience, their professional colleagues, whomever they're trying to reach. They're also, when they're in the classroom, looking at classroom participation, academic success of students. We love it when students move on to something else and have a good career and you know, some reputation back to the institution. So think about the stakeholders, whomever might be a stakeholder for your campus. There may be an alum, he or she is a stakeholder. Frame your aims within their needs and what's important to them, and then ask them what they can do. What is it they want to do? How, you know, what are you willing to contribute for this issue? You know, if you have a tobacco cessation issue or something with vaping or something with marijuana or something with methamphetamines, you know, something that's on your campus or coming to your campus because you know about the incoming students, what is it that they're willing to commit themselves to do? Ask them, engage them, point them to the next step. And I'm going to give you a tool later on that. Some reflections, B.J. McConnell, who was very active with the White House Initiative 30, 40 years ago, very active with the DARE program, active with some college initiatives. Just in a reflection, I interviewed her for the leadership book that again came out last fall, thinking about these various offices and groups were the way to go, and really the answer is all of them. And then Kim Dude, recently retired from University of Missouri. People haven't had the aha moment and that they could be part of the solution. So the question is, how do we help them have that aha moment? How do we help them feel like this is important for them? This is a not too high quality graphic. I am the graphics person, but if you try to think about the various campus groups, here are some of them, and you see a couple of them that are purposefully blank. What are the campus groups that might be at the table, whether in a formal way or informal way? People that you might think of when you're thinking of your stakeholders and you're thinking about those who might have a vested interest or you could rally around. Doesn't mean they're making a lifelong commitment. You may want them just for an hour or a half hour. You might want to engage their expertise or their colleagues or their students' expertise if you think about faculty or student organization advisors. How can you engage them? And then here's something that I actually did with a group 20 years ago. Many of you know that I did the Promising Practices Campus Alcohol Strategies Initiative. This was all about alcohol. I know you can't read the fine print, but I just want to engage you on this, and you can pull the whole thing down and have the website right here. But what we did is we pulled together best practices on alcohol, and this was alcohol issues for campuses, policies, programs, so forth. When we did a couple versions of this, the most recent was almost 20 years ago. But so we have this publication, again, it's sitting online as a PDF file, but our advisory group said, well, we need to share the vision that this is a big job, and it's not just the AOD coordinator's job. You know, it's everyone's job. It's a comprehensive program, and so we said, well, let's just kind of create a grid, because there's as you see here on the left side, there's a lot of groups that can be involved, and on the top you see a lot of components. So let's dissect that real quickly. And our point was here at the title, it's a shared responsibility. It's not just the AOD person's job. So, and simply with a comprehensive program, it's not just policy, you know, to do a policy or to just enforce or to just assess clinically and evaluate or train is not sufficient. We need all of the above. And then separately, we need a lot of groups involved. And I remember having a draft of this. Again, this is 20 years ago. And I went to our university president, made an appointment and talked with him. And I had a draft. It was taped together, not even pretty. And I said, you know, it's a big job. And he says, well, David, how are we doing? And I realized if you look at this grid, there's 8 columns and 10 rows, that's 80 cells. And in the fine print in here are examples. These examples are here, came from 2 sources. One is when we found something in the source book that would illustrate how health and counseling, the offices of health and counseling could be, when the Office of Health and Counseling would be involved in this, what do they do? It's more than support. There's a place for them to do enforcement. There's a place for them to do training. There's a place for them to do staffing. So each of these topics right here can be done by each of these offices here. And so we got the examples from our source book that we had published, and where there was a hole, we dreamed, we filled it in. And so there is no page reference back to the book. There are examples that came from our heads. So if you were to take something like this, if you emptied the whole grid, and this was a planning thing for you to say, how do we make this a shared responsibility for our campus? And how do we get others engaged and get the stakeholders involved and clarify outcomes that are reasonable for different groups? That helps to put the plan together. We're not going to go in detail on that, but I just wanted to illustrate this as an example of shared responsibility. Just a simple worksheet. You can create this in a Word document. Who's the group or organization or individual, and what might be a compelling interest for them? Faculty member, don't want students falling asleep in my classroom. I want their papers in a more quality way. I want them to land meaningful internships. You know, I as a faculty member found when I observed students presenting, some of the quality of their presentations was fair. So that's where I helped create a course on health communication. That was 20 years ago. That then became a course requirement. Students did better in making their case on whatever their topic area was, and that then made them a better interviewee as they went for a job. So engaging others. I also think about legacy, thinking about long-term, and I use this a lot in working with groups and individuals and students, and saying, what sort of legacy do you want? And ideally, what would it look like? And how are you going to go about creating it? And then I did the link to drugs and alcohol and said, how are your decisions about drugs and alcohol today going to affect your legacy tomorrow? And just thinking about that. So what steps will help you achieve your legacy, and then making, if you will, responsible decisions about drugs and alcohol so that they don't get in the way of your own achievements. Let's go to appeal. This whole area is really the meat. And so the meat of what we do in all this persuasion is a blend of approaches, Always want to maintain credibility, be attention getting, have consistency among your components. So if you're doing a campaign, they need to hold together. They don't want to contradict one another. Or if you're targeting this to, let's say, student athletes, you might have certain messages to student athletes and different messages to coaches and or trainers, but those should be consistent with one another. They may not necessarily be the same message. They just need to be complementary. So if we move with a couple of examples, again, Bill Modzelewski, former drug czar from U.S. Department of Education, said, we've never viewed this alcohol and drug issue as a marketing issue. And even saying, what's the best way to sell this to you and get that input? So that's getting feedback from your target audience, you know, the formative evaluation piece. And then Thomasina Borkman, who did a lot of work on self-help groups and mutual aid groups, her thinking is, what if we applied some of the Al-Anon principles on how you can hurt people by enabling and translate that into a more public view? Maybe there's ways of adapting that, just as a thought. So here's some of the tools. I'm going to go a little deeper on 3 of these, but just to highlight some of the tools, we've talked about data. That's important. Having some data, having examples, whether it's case studies or some what if scenarios. What if? Having testimonials. Maybe it's from people who've been involved with some of your efforts, or people who have had some tough times or tough issues regarding drugs and alcohol. Expert statements. That can be someone from on the campus. It could be a faculty member in recovery. I remember one who whispered to me, you know, we knew each other, and this person said, well, you know, I'm in recovery. I said, that's fine, you know, but that person was embarrassed and really didn't want to go public on the campus, which was fine. Did not want to go to the self-help groups on the campus, which is fine. But you know, there may be people who are advocates for you. He or she's in anthropology or in teaching geology or history, and they can be very helpful. And then you also have people who have the content knowledge in this from their own studies. You know, the researchers. I mentioned Dr. Borkman with self-help groups, or you know, Mark Gold, who was Mr. 1-800 or Dr. 1-800 cocaine 30 years ago. Scenarios can be helpful. I'm going to talk more about creative epidemiology in a moment. And a couple examples of social norms marketing. Many of you know already about that. Social marketing is different from social norms with the 4 Ps of social marketing. Linking and pairing, I'm going to do some examples on, so I'll save that. Positioning is an odd concept. It's something to think about. You know, how do we position ourselves? Because there's so many messages out there. You know, we can position ourselves if we have a product or some topic because we're the first out there, or we can say we have the most number of hits, or we are the best, whatever the factor that you're making that judgment on. Position, how do you position yourself in the eyes and minds of the audience that you're trying to reach so that your message is heard when there's all that clutter out there? How do you position yourself? Maybe we're the geek. Maybe we're the compassionate ones. Maybe we're the ones who do the good blend, the next item below it, of quantitative and qualitative. But just thinking about positioning, and there are books on positioning. Bookends is pretty classic. You'll see the objectives for this webinar at the end. That's a bookend. The classic message for giving a speech is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. So those are like bookends. And then a couple of miscellaneous things, you know, could be some humor, could be an acronym, could be an easy phone number, a memorable website. You know, if you're driving along the highway and you see a billboard, how are you going to remember that phone number, that website? You know, if it's some random number, well, you need some words. And, you know, you can do a phone number with more than 7 letters after the 800. The other letters just fall out. You know, like 1-800-COCAINE is an easy one, was an easy one to remember. But what if cocaine had 9 letters, or the word that you want? Methamphetamine has, you know, 15 letters or whatever. But BACUS was an acronym, Boost Alcohol Consciousness Concerning the Health of University Students. You know, BACUS. You know, I had some early programs I called one team and another one triad. Those stood for things. And people remembered those, and it got some validity in the community. But that helped with the memory. So here's creative epidemiology. Basically, we know what epidemiology is. We're seeing that a lot today with the coronavirus and following a lot of that data. But with creative epidemiology, the aim is to take those bewildering numbers and bring them home so you remember them. I mean, I can ask you, I did a workshop with this outline with these 9 elements of the NASPA Strategies Conference. And I said, one of the classic examples is with how many people die every year due to tobacco causes. I'm not going to query you. It's not going to be a polling question. You probably know the answer. It's just under 500,000. I mean, it's 490,000 people. I would never say 500,000 because that's exaggeration. We don't do that. We need to be precise. But how many people can remember 490,000 people in the US every year? Well, that's a hard one. So you need to restate it with some images that are dramatic and brief and it's memorable. I mean, look at some of these factors here. It's true. So there can be cost equivalence. And the classic example, and people kind of went, oh, no, don't do that example. For the tobacco one was the classic one used, and you'll see it repeated periodically, is it's as if 2 jumbo jets filled with people crashed today over Miami, and tomorrow over San Francisco, and the next day over Minneapolis, et cetera, et cetera. And now you get it. That's a lot. That's a lot. Or here's a fun creative ippy one. This is about each year the equivalent of 110 Epcot Center balls. Of course I have to do that since I'm talking with you from Florida. That's how many cigarette butts worth end up in our water. We don't see the cigarette butts, but we would notice the Epcot Center balls, 110 of them. So that's creative epi, and lots more examples, like one with a college campaign years ago with college students spend more on alcohol than they spend on books. I mean, that was a classic one. College students drink enough beer alone to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool for every college and university in the country. Those are visuals. So think about what's relevant for your audience. Social norms marketing. saying here's what the majority do, and it points to a next step. Some examples from a couple schools. There's lots and lots and lots of examples out there for different topics. Linking and pairing is a great one. You can link it, so rather than just put your issue out there, you tie it into something that has something relevant and something that is already existing, whether it's a week or some contrast or it's a season. I write a monthly column for our local community, and I try to tie some sort of link into something national or local, always some sort of link, different things. I already wrote the April article, and I wanted to emphasize something about 15 different courses offered that month in our community. So I titled it 15+3 because we have 15 courses and 3 lectures. And so I talked about 15+3, and it's April, so it's not. I said it's not April 15th that we're talking about tax day, but it's something else. And it was just meant to catch attention. Or here's one where someone's linking air pollution to the new tobacco. So you'll see this, and once you've become acquainted with some of the linking and the creative epi, you'll see those used out there. Or this is out of my health and safety communications book. Again, I'll highlight that later. But this just happens to be the month of November, and you see over here, these are the awareness months. So if something you're doing has to do with pancreatic cancer or lung cancer, or you want to tie it into healthy skin in some way, go for it. Find something that is linking for you. You may want to have done your event in October, but maybe you wait to November to link it. Or tying into a day or to a week. And this exists for every month. You can go to this location down here, a couple locations, and look up what are some of the things that are happening at a national level for that month or that year. Now, if you want to tie it to the day, today is March 11th. What happened on this day? Well, we go back a couple hundred years, and something about long distance communication, or Paul McCartney was knighted. I mean, if this ties into you for your initiative, use it. I mean, I don't know what the relevance of this would be to this, but if you wanted to do something like we want to try to dam up something, we tie into the Boulder Dam, or something with North Vietnam, or this one literally came up when I pulled a lot of these slides together a month ago. A lot of the news that's on today was not here. This one actually was on this date in 1918. So 102 years ago, the influenza epidemic began on this date. And then if we wanted to cheat a little bit, tomorrow Girl Scouts was founded. I mean, just have fun with this and just be cognizant of the linking and pairing idea. And then just a few visual images. Just to highlight some things that may work for you for a particular audience. If you're trying to reach veterans or trying to deal with the issue of whether it's underage drinking or impaired driving or certain topics, you're thinking of different ways of presenting. Here's a way of doing data in a mountaintop way with snow. This happens to be a lunch. It's the first time done. I think it was the Foster Care Association doing a lunch in front of the US Capitol, and then got media attention. That was a different type of communication and trying to persuade. A billboard, the bathrooms, what they call the Stall Street Journal, the stall talks, different people. Different messages. Again, some things are tied into a campaign, so you'll have a similar image on the top, and you have some, we feel, a reference organization, maybe a website. Maybe you want something that has to do with a pie chart about money, or a Bill of Rights. You're adapting Bill of Rights, but you're talking about relationships, and maybe you dovetail that to a month with domestic violence or something else, or a week. So different ways. This is a way of kind of like positioning. We're the only children's hospital in Western Michigan. So it's positioned from not just the first, we're the only, or first and only. First, only, and best. So, playing that out, blending a lot of these tools, infographics, different ways, visual, positive, cheery. So just different graphics for your consideration. So I'm going to open it back up to questions again. Does anyone have a question or verbally that they'd like to ask? We have another 10 minutes we're going to go on this. Anyone have anything at this point? Okay, we have one more opportunity for that at the end. So let's look at last three are relatively brief. Let's look at commitment, demonstrating your personal commitment, building a strategy. This goes back to the beginning, and it tied into the periodic reviews and monitoring, thinking about data collection, qualitative and quantitative, thinking about how do we review, how do we take stock. Let's even take stock of how we're doing on our own guiding principles. Are we fulfilling what we said we wanted to do? Are we doing whatever parameters we just set up? A couple of quotes, again, Kim Doon from Missouri, trying to make this a front burner issue. She says, I like this right here. I think in a lot of places it's not even on the stove. I'm concerned with that now nationally at the college level, where I see a lot of alcohol and other drug issues getting infused with wellness. I see no issue with infusing with wellness. I'm concerned if it gets buried in wellness and then it's off the stove. So we need to find ways to keep alcohol and other drugs on the radar screen and active. With leadership, there's opportunities to use their position for a bully pulpit. New director of counseling and psychological services, new director of residence halls, new director of health services, new athletic director. Maybe they can use their position politically, the president, the chancellor, chief student affairs officers. There's some resources. This is going to dovetail with the next segment on resources, but I want to highlight this here because this ties into our commitment and helps to sustain us. The strategic prevention framework with its elements about planning. This came out of promising practices, same as that task force planner, the shared accountability grid I shared a moment ago, about 8 steps. And look at this from years ago, determining the guiding principles. This, again, what are your guiding principles? Again, student engagement, faculty engagement, thinking long-term, whatever your guiding principles are. And then, again, this came out, we're helping our professionals to articulate and market. And it's not just to the audience that we're trying to reach, specifically students is the primary audience for most of us, but it's also articulating and marketing to the decision makers, the gatekeepers that we've talked about, the stakeholders, those that it really have a lot of that leadership in the institution. This is a new publication by the Drug Enforcement Administration, came out 2 months ago. And then here's another one from CSAP on substance misuse prevention for young adults. This includes college and non-college. I happen to be, I was honored to be appointed to the CSAP National Advisory Council last summer. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, and we are, as of yesterday, doing that virtually because we are not flying. But this is a new publication. We're talking about this and how to get this out to our communities and to our campuses and how can it be helpful. You can download it now, the PDF file, and see how it can be helpful to you. Thinking about legislative and thinking about your commitment to monitor the boundaries, if you will, and things that are happening at the state level that reduce, if you will, policies or make things more open or not taking the leadership that you want your own state. And this happens to be a Virginia state tracking form. So looking at that for your own. And I know that as a state employee, most are not allowed to lobby, but there's ways of gathering information, sharing information without lobbying. And then this was something that I prepared for a new college president. I did a briefing book, but I did a 1-page summary so that our new university president could be informed on this issue. And so adapt it, use your own, but find ways to inform those stakeholders and those where you want to get their support. Resources, adapt from quality sources. Adapt from quality sources. Again, I highlight those 4 that we just on the prior slides. Again, you can download those, and again, you can have a PDF of this entire slideshow. Support those who are already engaged. We don't need to compete. Learn from other fields of study. I mean, that may be from those who are specialists in public health, those who are specialists in drug and alcohol issues or counseling or therapy, but maybe there's something from history. Maybe there's others in other fields of study where you can adapt a methodology, in business, from business or from anthropology or the environment. And make sure you're error-free, whether that's typos or not being exaggerating, just error-free is really important as you're sharing your work. A perspective that I think is always important as we're thinking about this and using our resources, we're talking about moving the needle. We are involved with this because we want to see change, but it's hard. Just keep that perspective. We can move the needle. We have moved the needle. If you think about drunk driving, we have moved that needle. If you think about alcohol and drug issues among college students, if you look at the data, we have moved the needle. The high school students who are coming our way or not coming our way, we have moved the needle. Some other needles have moved not in the direction we want. So it's monitoring that, but it's hard. It's hard work. There's a lot of organizations, a lot of agencies who are out there, who have resources, who have initiatives, who have funding. Some of these have funding. So engage those as resources. This is the book I've referenced a couple of times, Health and Safety Communication. It came out a couple of years ago. It's available, and you can see the chapters over here. This is more of the theoretical grounding. This is more for a classroom. This book was written for practitioners, so it's also for the sheriff and the nurse and the doctor and the community, so that he or she can go testify to the town council or make public presentations on TV. But it's also for a campus and a community at any level, and state leaders. And then here's some of these specific elements, whether you're doing a campaign or public presence means going on TV. How do you manage the TV interviewer, workshop, social media, and so forth? How do you get the media involved to cover your story? And even if you have no budget, how can you do that? And then last but not least is remembering hope. Incorporate idealism, incorporate your dreams, keep your optimism, keep your perseverance. This is an uphill battle. We can make progress. We have made progress. Have the courage to speak up. Because if you're not speaking up and you're the knowledgeable one, your silence speaks. So it's important to say, I don't know if I agree, or I'm concerned about going in that direction. If not you, who? You have to have the courage to speak up. And my message to you is just want to empower you. And if you want to talk more about that, then say, I need a pep talk, well, send me an email and we'll set up a time. Bill Kane, who set up an initiative in New Jersey called the Lawyers Assistance Program. That's EAP for lawyers in the state. Every state has one of those. He's also set up a judges assistance program for judges, meaning with their own substance use disorder issues. So, but he says never give up. He says you just can't give up for individuals and for programs. And then Jeff Levy, who lost his son tragically to an impaired driver. The other driver was drunk. So it's hard to have optimism and hope, but he says, he fought a lot, and he lobbied a lot because he could, but he picked the same fights. And so I know I would do that for myself too. This is the book that I published last fall, which has a lot of these, it had these quotes and many more, all these quotes and many more. The health communication book has a lot more examples, both college-based and non-college-based. And then strategies. This one is about alcohol and drug issues society-wise. So this is for a community. This is for a campus. There are many campus examples, and there are many non-campus examples that can be adapted. And so you'll see a similar flavor, like believing in yourself and advocacy and vision for the future. So those are the 9 elements. Those are the 9 steps for persuasion planning. Any open questions here at this point? This is our 3rd of 3 open questions. We're going to go back to one other set of polling in a moment, but any other open questions? Okay. Again, this was all framed around the pyramid of success. My aim was to work on your competence, confidence, and commitment. It's a thumbnail. It's a thumbnail. It's hard to capture this. Again, this is a lot of work, and we all keep growing on this. So I would like to have us, as we think about what you want your audience to know, feel, or do, what I'd like to also do is one last polling. Again, you know these questions. Can we go to these last questions and see how your results compare to the first? So the first question is, right now, well, it's actually 50 minutes after we started, how would you rate your competence? And I think the polling is open now. And we do have some voting coming in. How do you rate your competence on advocacy issues? So competence is the first one. Of course, I'm going to ask confidence and then commitment. So a couple more, please vote for competence. Okay, we're going to close that one. And then we're going to go to the second one. I'll come back and share all these. What's your confidence? So your confidence, a couple more votes. What's your confidence in advocating now? Your confidence. And then last call on that one, and we'll close. And then third, we're going to go to what's your commitment for that? So how would you rate your commitment on a 1 to 5 scale? Your commitment for persevering. Okay, so let's close and let's just take a real quick look at this. And part of this is just in the eyes of, I'm sharing these poll results. So what we had at the beginning, if you recall at the beginning, we had about 60% at a 2 and 20% at a 3 and 20% at a 5. So this is now 33 and 67. So that's a little higher. Okay, so let's just look at that was the competence. So competence went up, confidence also went up. It was 20, 60, and 20 again. So here we have 33% moderate. I'm sorry, 50% moderate and 50% extremely high. And then on the commitment one, the very last one, we had 50% for and 50% high. And so that all of these moved up, which was the aim, to have it move up. We have a long ways to go. All of us have a long ways to go. But this I view as an ongoing process. Again, going back, what do we want the audience to know, feel, or do is really where we're shaping it. And then these 3 objectives, the 9-step model, some specific approaches, and gaining some competence and skills. So hopefully we've moved this a little bit, a tad. Please go back and review some things. Please reach out should you want to for further information, further examples. I will share the PDF of this with the webinar planners so you can review this at your own leisure. You can go back to certain points of the webinar and share short versions or short segments with others. And that's how you can, gain some allies and engage some of the stakeholders. I hope this was helpful. Here's contact information. Again, I hope it was helpful, hope it was worth your time, and best wishes and for every success through this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. David Anderson, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. So please keep an eye out for an email for the GoToWebinar that will come after the program. The email will have a link for you to fill out an evaluation. This evaluation will really help us with the planning of future events. Certificates will be issued within 7 to 10 business days from the webinar, and we will have the webinar available to view on the IHEC website. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.